Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am filming a book video today. Today's New Year's Eve and I don't have anywhere to be, so I'm in my room filming. I hope that you can't hear fireworks in the back. There's only a little bit going on right now because it's still early, but yes, I wanted to film because I reached my reading goal today. I read 30 books in the year of 2021, so I'm proud of myself. I know it's not a lot because a lot of people read way more books, but for me it's a lot. I've already done 2 previous videos of the books that I read this year already, so I'll leave them up here in the description if you want to watch those. But these are the last books that I read this year, not in order. A lot of these books are incredibly depressing, which was hard for me to get through. I'm gonna do this in order of me reading them, as I always do. The first book that I read is On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Vuong. I actually got this recommended from a friend. I hadn't heard about it before, but it's essentially a letter from a son to his mother who cannot read. So whether she actually gets to read what he wrote for her is up in the air. And it's very interesting. It's about a Vietnamese immigrant family and their life in the United States. I gave this book 3 stars. The content of this book is kind of really brutal and heavy, but it's written in such a poetic, soft, and pretty way that it feels so contradicting. But Vuong is honestly such a good writer, and he's so detailed in the way that he writes, and everything he writes is so pretty. It's insane. I actually got one of his poetry books for Christmas and I'm really excited to read it because his writing is just so pretty, and I can't wait to see what that looks like in poetry, because this is literally poetic even though it's technically not supposed to be poetry. I'm gonna read off of my reviews because I read these a long time ago and I don't remember everything, but this book touches on the trauma that his family has, his mother, his grandma, and him, and I thought that was really interesting because it kind of showed the different perspectives when it came to the family as a whole, if that makes sense. I thought it was very interesting to read about his relationship with his mother as well as his grandma, and how it showed their trauma and their hardships and how that affected their own lives as well as his life. And it also showed how they struggled with being immigrants, and some of it was relatable to me. This is one of the first books that I've read talking about immigrant life, and though it's very different from my experience, some parts of it felt relatable, and this just made me want to read way more content from immigrants. It's nice to read things that you relate to because it helps you feel understood and stuff. So yeah, despite the fact, once again, that everybody's experiences are very different, there are things that are very relatable and kind of universal, I feel like. And yeah, it's nice to read about that. I'm definitely gonna buy more books from immigrants and, you know, read about immigrant stories. One criticism that I wrote down was that the book jumps from one event to the next very fast at times. It has a lot of flashbacks and such, which is fine, and it adds depth to the story, but at times, especially towards the end of the book, there was so much jumping around in the timeline that in my opinion it got a bit disorganized and it kind of disrupted the flow of the story. Another criticism that I have is just regarding the organization of the book again. I think that the way that he organized the events in it were a little bit weird sometimes. Like, he would have, like, suddenly there would be like a super heavy animal abuse scene, and then it would just go back to the regular storyline, and then sometimes it would have like a sex scene and then a death out of nowhere, and I was like, oh my god, what is going on? I feel like if he separated these scenes a bit more and made them less sudden, it would make the writing a bit more cohesive, I think. Next book I read was Normal People by Sally Rooney. Everybody loves this book. I got this book because my friend posted a quote from it and I was like, I need to read this. I gave it 3 stars as well. This book is about 2 people that are complete opposites, but they cannot stay apart from each other. That's how I'm gonna explain it. One thing about Sally Rooney is that she doesn't use quotation marks, and I surprisingly enjoyed that. I thought that I was going to get confused because she doesn't use quotation marks, but the way that she writes is so cohesive and understanding that I feel like I actually understood the dialogue better in this book that she doesn't use quotation marks than in other books that use quotation marks. Regarding the plot itself, I felt kind of conflicted whether I liked the book or not. I still don't know whether I like this book or not, but I did enjoy reading it. I read it in only 2 days, and I never was bored while reading it. It just always kept me interested. I said that the characters were described very well, so I felt like I understood everybody's role in the story. But the main characters, I felt like they were so complex that I almost, that I knew them, but I also almost didn't know, like I couldn't know what was going on in their mind. The relationship of this book is very complicated, and it doesn't really have any closure at all. So if that's gonna drive you crazy, good luck reading this book. But I think that this made this book so realistic because in life you have you're gonna stumble upon some relationships that you have with people that are very confusing and that you don't really understand, or that don't have any closure, and they're just really messy. I think it is a good book because after I finished reading it, I sat down and stared at the wall and had to like put pieces together in my mind and think about it. And whenever a book does that, I think it's a good book. But I don't know whether I actually enjoy it or not. You see both characters having a bunch of struggles, but you just see them continue living their lives, because that's how it is in real life. We're all struggling in some way, but you just have to keep it moving. You just have to keep living our daily lives despite the fact that we may be in a terrible like mental health state. And I feel like this book kind of demonstrated that. And Connell in this book, I feel like he was relatable to me because he has anxiety. Wow. The next book that I read was November 9 by Colleen Hoover. I loved this book. I read it in a day and I gave it 5 stars. It's a romance book. What do you expect from me? So in this book, they only meet once a year on November 9. I'm not gonna tell you why. And the love interest is a novelist. So the main character is trying to figure out whether their relationship is actually serious and real, or whether he's just doing all of this for the sake of writing a book about it. There's a lot more to it, and there's a huge plot twist in here. Colleen Hoover, once again, so good. I need to read her other books because she just always keeps you interested, and there's always something going on. Wasn't boring. Now the one that everybody's been waiting for, No Longer Human. I got this book as a birthday gift. Thank you, Brian, for making me suffer. I gave this book 4 stars. This book was insane. It was insane. It drove me crazy. It made my brain hurt. I said, I don't even know how to review this book because it's written extremely well, and it makes me doubt whether I can even grasp it all. This book is about a man who walks us through his life as somebody who feels like he doesn't understand human beings and how they work. He feels like an outcast. He feels super alienated from the world around him and the people around him. And essentially, he doesn't want to comprehend how human beings work because he doesn't want to understand how we do the terrible things that we do. He sees humans as terrible and awful creatures who are untrustworthy and judgmental and dishonest. And because of that, he doesn't want to be a part of that. That just leads him to put on a facade. He acts as a funny person so that he can make people laugh, and he doesn't have to ever really talk about himself or really try to be himself because that's terrifying to him. The main character is super self-conscious that attempting to live life as himself feels shameful and embarrassing to him. So he just kind of lives life through what people want him to be because he's scared and ashamed of trying to be himself, especially when he knows how human beings are and how judgmental they are, and he doesn't want to deal with that. So he just goes with whatever people want of him instead of trying to actually live his life the way that he wants to. So he just deceives people constantly because he's afraid of creating any sort of conflict with them. Because of this, the main character has a really hard time forming connections with people because he's scared of how they will react to his opinions and his way of being. I think this book was very good. It was insanely depressing and honestly confusing a lot of the time because it's just very intense, but I understand it. I feel like everybody will be able to relate to this book a little bit. I recommend reading it just because it's fucking crazy. I hope that however I explain this book makes sense because I don't even remember what I just said. But I definitely recommend this book. I think it's very good. It's gonna make you go insane probably. So the next book that I read was The Testaments from Margaret Atwood. It's the second book from The Handmaid's Tale. This book is essentially just talks about life in the universe of The Handmaid's Tale, but through completely different perspectives as the first book talks about. The first book is from one handmaid, and this book is in the perspective of her two daughters, as well as the villain, the main villain of the story. And I thought it was super interesting. This book was written way later than the first book, so it's written very differently and it's way more modern when it comes to the writing and the way that the plot is and the way that the plot is told. And I honestly really enjoyed it. I think it's very obvious that it's supposed to appeal to a younger audience, but I don't mind it. I'm young. This book is just depressing to read because the way that the society is in this book is just so fucked up. But despite that, I really enjoyed reading this book and seeing the different perspective because you were able to see how other people live life in this universe, in this world, which you couldn't really see in The Handmaid's Tale because it was just from one perspective, despite of the fact that you kind of got explained what other people's lives were like. I feel like this kind of showed even more and it added way more depth to the story, and I think it made me understand the way that this world works even better than when I read The Handmaid's Tale. So yeah, once again, this is so detailed. Margaret Atwood is an amazing writer. She describes every character so much and every event so well that not once you feel confused or, like lost. She's crazy. She's crazy for this. I gave this book 4 stars. And I definitely recommend it if you read The Handmaid's Tale. Obviously, if you want to read this, read The Handmaid's Tale first. The Handmaid's Tale is a classic, so once again, it's written very differently. But I love this book. We got different perspectives. I understood way more of how the world worked, and I liked to see how young people's lives were and how other people's lives were in this book. It was also much more action-packed, and I feel like it kept me interested more than The Handmaid's Tale did, just because that's just the type of reader that I am. The next book I read is The Great Gatsby. I read this one very recently. The Great Gatsby is a classic. I feel like most people have read this, but I didn't read it. I honestly didn't really enjoy this. I forgot to rate it, but I think I would give it 2 stars. It just didn't interest me. It's just about rich people and how their lives are and how they're kind of really selfish and not nice. I don't know. I didn't really find any of the characters in this likable. I don't know, like they were just annoying. I just want to say, guys, like take my opinion with a grain of salt because everybody likes different things. I feel like people rely on my opinions a little too much when it comes to me giving book recommendations. This is just my opinion. I just didn't find the plot very interesting. Towards the end of the book, more things started to happen, so it started to get a bit more interesting, but still I was just like, eh. And the ending just had so many more things happen that it felt kind of rushed and random a little bit. The only thing that kept me going reading this is imagining it as a gay love story. I'm not gonna explain it to you if you haven't read it because I don't want to spoil anything. But if you read this book as a gay love story, then it will be good. I don't know, guys, I don't know. I think that reading about rich people is just not for me. Anyways, the last book that I read that I actually finished today is The Purple Palace and Other Poems. It's from Purple Palace here on YouTube, and I really enjoyed it. I really like it. Her poems, her life is super different than my life, and I thought it was super interesting to read about it. and also I just like her as a person. I already talked about her in my last video, but I really like her perspective on life. I feel like she has such a positive outlook on things, and reading her poetry just made me happy. Like, a lot of the time whenever I read poetry, it's just super depressing and somber, but her poetry is very casual and almost informal, and it's just fun and light weight. So I really liked it. I really enjoyed reading this book. I think that the drawings are so cute. Like, look at this. Like, look, it's just a drawing of a cake, bro. The way that she thinks about things just are so reassuring. I feel like it's just casual and nice and fun. And like that. So yeah, that's it. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I feel like I did a terrible job at explaining everything, worse than I usually do, but I hope that you can take any recommendation from any of these books.